Good evening. Less than 2 weeks ago, Qantas boss Alan Joyce was soaring. Today, his 15-year reign as chief executive of Australia's national carrier came to an end. After overseeing record multi-billion-dollar profits, a series of scandals over the past few days has sent Qantas's reputation into a tailspin, forcing Joyce into early retirement.
For weeks now, Alan Joyce making the news for all the wrong reasons. Today, his biggest headline, calling it quits. Handing over to new Chief Executive Vanessa Hudson 2 months earlier than scheduled. The best thing I can do under these circumstances, he said, is to bring forward my retirement and hand over to Vanessa and the new management team, now knowing they will do an excellent job.
The board has put pressure on Joyce to go early. It might be the first decision of the board that we agree with.
Incoming boss Vanessa Hudson delivered a personal message to staff.
Right now, it feels like we're facing another challenging time. We know that post-COVID, we haven't always delivered to what our customers expect, but we are listening and we hear what they are saying.
What a nosedive it's been. 12 days ago, flying high, announcing a record $2.5 billion profit.
Alan, thanks for you for 15 years of service. You've been an incredible leader. We are in a better and stronger position for it, so thank you. So good luck as well.
Thanks, Vanessa. Thank you.
He showered staff and bonuses and customers with frequent flyer points.
I'm honestly not sure. We can come back to
You're not sure? My goodness.
But the giveaways were undercut after a Senate grilling showing Qantas was hanging on to $500 million in flight credits. It forced a backflip.
I'm Alan Joyce, and today we're scrapping the expiry dates on all travel credits that came out of COVID.
Then it was the turn of the consumer watchdog.
Qantas has misled its customers.
The ACCC alleging Qantas sold tickets for flights that had been cancelled. The matter now in court and could cost Qantas hundreds of millions.
This is a CEO that has quite literally destroyed the reputation of our national carrier. Is it redeemable? Of course we all hope so.
In 15 years as CEO, Alan Joyce has earned $125 million. And despite all that has gone wrong in recent days, Joyce is set to enjoy retirement with a huge payout.
The board has allowed him to walk, at this point, to walk away with $24 million.
At the next Qantas annual general meeting on November the 3rd, shareholders who have watched their shares dive 12% in the last month will have the chance to either approve or reject Alan Joyce's payout. Alan Joyce has been part of Australian aviation for more than 2 decades. First Ansett, then Jetstar, taking the reins of the national carrier in 2008. He's overseen highs and lows at Qantas. In 2011, he took the unprecedented step of grounding the airline's entire fleet during an industrial dispute with staff, impacting almost 70,000 passengers around the world.
I want to say how sorry I am that this course of action has become necessary.
He's presided over profits, losses, strikes, aircraft emergencies and a once-in-a-generation pandemic that took the airline to the brink. But it made it through COVID to celebrate its 100th birthday, while personally he campaigned for marriage equality in Australia.
And I'm waiting for my partner to propose to me, so that's the next big thing.
The 57-year-old told 9 News about his retirement plans just a few days ago.
Well, I'm going back to see my mum in Ireland for a couple of months, back at the end of the year, and spend Christmas there. And then I'm going on a bucket list Antarctic cruise for a month.
There's a widely held perception that under Alan Joyce, the spirit of Australia, arguably the most iconic and trusted brand in Australia, has at the very least been battered, at worst trashed. Alan Joyce's successor has an unenviable task. Mark Burrows, 9 News.
We're going to breaking news now. The federal government's decision to block extra flights from a Qantas rival will now be examined by a Senate committee. Let's go live to political editor Charles Croucher. Charles, good evening. Difficult questions again today for the Prime Minister.
Evening, Pete. Yeah, the Prime Minister was pressed again on Qantas and the decision to deny Qatar Airways an extra 21 flights per week. Anthony Albanese said in Parliament he didn't discuss the decision with Alan Joyce or any senior Qantas executives. However, he was lobbied by the Virgin CEO, Jane Herdlicker. In the last hour, the Senate has voted to establish a select committee. It will now examine the Qatar decision and other recent decisions regarding airlines and their impact on the cost of flights. It means tonight, Pete, Alan Joyce may be finishing, but this controversy is not.
All right, Charles, thank you. A reprieve for borrowers, with the Reserve Bank leaving the official interest rate on hold at 4.1%. Philip Lowe's last rate decision as governor. But while there's talk of the next move being down, our central bank is still worried about inflation and hasn't ruled out another rate rise.
A last march to an RBA board meeting as governor, Philip Lowe in the spotlight for the final time.
You have a good day.
And borrowers certainly did have a good day.
No change today. The RBA cash rate remains at 4.1%.
A wait and see due to uncertainty over the economic outlook.
We have seen a run of weaker economic data for the jobs market, softer than expected wages growth, increasing signs that retail sales are flagging and consumers are struggling to keep up their spending.
Philip Lowe's 7-year term is one of two halves. The first, a period of record low interest rates bottoming out at just 0.1%. That was followed by the most aggressive raising of rates in history, 12 increases in 14 months. And that despite his now infamous prediction they wouldn't rise before 2024. Now, while inflation has eased, the Reserve Bank says it's still too high and another rate rise might be necessary. All that becomes the problem for new Governor Michelle Bullock.
I think Michelle Bullock will have an easy ride of it because Governor Lowe has done all the heavy lifting. He's lifted rates dramatically.
As for when interest rates might start falling again, well, even our brightest economic minds can't agree. CBA says it could be as early as March. Westpac not until next September, others even later than that. As for the RBA, well, it says it's simply too early to be talking about cutting rates. The reality is most variable rate borrowers are only just starting to feel the impact of the last hike in June.
Put any chatter of a rate cut out of your head. Focus on clearing at least one more rate rise just to be sure. If cuts come, well, it will be a welcome surprise in 2024.
Philip Lowe will give a final speech on Thursday, summing up perhaps a tumultuous time as governor, putting behind him what must be one of the toughest jobs in the country. Eddie Meyer, 9 News.
Let's bring in Nine's finance editor Chris Kohler. Chris, is anyone still predicting another rate hike?
Well, Pete, some are. Money markets, in fact, put the chance of another hike by the end of this year at 30%, so still certainly possible. And the RBA statement did have something to say on that. Some further tightening of monetary policy may be required, it said. But look, most economists say the coast is now clear and we shouldn't expect any further interest rate hikes. Of course, we will wait to hear from Michelle Bullock when she takes over on Monday week, Pete.
Chris, thank you. A man has died after his car collided with a mobile crane near Windsor. Crews were called to Berkshire Park just after 7 this morning, finding the driver's side of the vehicle ripped apart. The truck driver wasn't injured and was taken to Nepean Hospital for mandatory testing. The Minns government will begin negotiations to keep the state's largest coal-fired power plant open beyond its slated closure in just 2 years' time. It comes after 2 reports cited reliability risks if the plant closes and the supply gaps are not filled.
In just 2 years' time, the plug is due to be pulled on the state's biggest coal station. But tonight, the Energy Minister is flagging she could step in.
There are reliability risks with Eraring exiting early. That's why we're going to talk to Eraring and talk about what the options are.
Negotiating with the operator about extending Eraring's life is a key recommendation in an energy checkup handed to the minister, which raises concerns that current construction market pressures could delay the rollout of the wind, solar and battery projects needed to plug supply gaps when Eraring comes offline in 2025.
I'm not willing to gamble the reliability and cost pressures of New South Wales consumers and households and businesses on a hunch.
But she won't give a time frame or a cost.
In a statement, Origin Energy says it is willing to negotiate with the government to avert reliability risks, but critically it also notes the economic challenges facing the plant.
analysts say an extension deal could cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars.
It's sensible to look at what alternatives could $200 or $400 million a year provide for New South Wales citizens.
They should be delivering on their commitment, which is to speed up the transition, rather than having a big taxpayer subsidy to a coal station.
At State Parliament, Liz Daniels, 9 News.
And let's go to Liz Daniels, who's now at Leichhardt Public School. Liz, the state's teachers are weighing up a new pay deal with the government.
Well, Peter, it's expected teachers will sign on to this in-principle agreement in the coming days. It ends weeks of bitter dispute between the union and the state government. The Education Minister, Prue Carr, was back on school grounds for the first time in weeks today with the nuts and bolts of the offer. For first-year teachers, it will see a 12% pay bump, taking their starting pay to $85,000 a year. For top-grade teachers, they'll be offered 8%. It'll all come into effect in just 4 weeks' time, and Peter, it brings New South Wales teachers from being among the lowest paid in the country to the nation's highest.
Liz, thank you. 2 months into their trial, the three brothers who owned White Island when it erupted have had the individual charges against them dismissed by a judge in Auckland. 22 people died in the disaster, including 17 Australians. Andrew, James and Peter Buttle were individually accused as company directors of failing to exercise due diligence to manage the volcano's risk. A man has been charged, accused of targeting businesses in Sydney's eastern suburbs, armed with a knife. One worker and 2 passing tradies confronting the alleged robber at Randwick, trying to trap him inside the store.
Pulling a knife from his sleeve, the alleged thief makes his demands. Bravely, Shabazz Khan instead plays defence, the 28-year-old pushing the man's arm down before swiftly jumping outside. Shabazz even trying to lock him in the store. The game of cat and mouse outside the Easy Mart around 10:30, joined in by 2 tradies next door. A metal chair thrown to help fend off the man. Realising there'll be no cooperation or cash, the mystery man cleans out the phone accessory stand. A quick tanty. Then, after leaving, returns to quench his thirst. 3 prime energy drinks valued at $10 a bottle.
I like these drinks too.
But it's claimed this wasn't the first stop of the night along Perouse Road. Police say earlier this worker at the Randwick BP was threatened, forced to hand over cash and cigarettes.
It's scary to think that people carrying weapons around.
Christy Collins, who owns the gym next door, is no stranger to opportunistic theft. In an unrelated incident, her designer handbag allegedly stolen by this pair on her launch night of all occasions.
Altogether, it was probably about $7,000 worth of gear, a Louis Vuitton handbag, Tom Ford sunglasses and prescription frames, a Chanel purse. You know, those things don't come cheap, and I work really hard for my money.
After a short pursuit and with the help of the dog squad, officers arrested the 25-year-old back near the service station where his alleged crime spree began. In Randwick, Hayley Francis, 9 News.
Police have inadvertently nabbed a wanted Alameddine family member who a month ago jumped the back fence of his Greenacre home and bolted when officers arrived to arrest him over firearm offences. This afternoon, officers carrying out an unrelated search warrant on Bundock Street at South Coogee noticed 33-year-old Ahmad Alameddine running from the unit block. He wasn't so quick this time, police arresting him after a short chase. 8 people, including 5 children, were forced to flee this house fire in Hinchinbrook last night. It started in the garage before spreading to the roof and took 24 firefighters to bring it under control. Nobody was injured and it's unclear how the fire started. We know a hot, dry summer is on the way, but state emergency services are warning there's a wet spring to get through first. Today, crews started intensive training, so they're ready for whatever the elements throw at them.
Consider this a preview. 10,000 lightning strikes in just 2 hours. Last week, thrashing our city, and tonight the Bureau of Meteorology says brace yourself for the main event.
This is peak storm season.
Today, State Emergency Service volunteers whitewater training.
There's going to be the flash flooding. We'll have hail.
And we do have a cold front moving through the state.
The New South Wales SES is there to help you, and as I say, to any calls for assistance that might be needed.
This summer coming with a blockbuster forecast, destructive storms, just the supporting act. Today training for flash flooding, but it is wind like this one whipping around me here in Penrith that has all our emergency agencies so concerned. Add lightning and extreme heat. It is a not so perfect storm for all of our state. Today in the Upper Hunter and early line of defence, the RFS doing controlled burns through wine country to protect homes, also working to mitigate the risk around Warragamba Dam.
We're currently in El Niño alert, expecting hotter days and hotter nights.
This summer's weapon, the Hazards Near Me app, merging information from crucial emergency agencies, launched in February, but to date fewer than 204,000 people have downloaded the app, just 2% of our state's population.
What I'm asking for is for everybody to do their bit.
In Penrith, Ruth Wynne-Williams, 9 News.
Concussion is one of the biggest issues in Australian sport. Today, a year-long inquiry was laid out in Parliament, hoping to change the way games are played, starting with our youngest athletes.
It's a feature uniting footy.
Ponga has been hit flush.
And here he goes, just collapses. This is not good.
Big hits equal big highlights, but increasingly a big problem for Australia's football codes.
We've got to get rid of that sort of attitude that it's just a head knock.
Tonight, the Senate tabling a 12-month inquiry into head trauma in sports, impacting household names like Danny Frawley and Wally Lewis.
If we put our hands up and seek sympathy, then we're going to be seen as the real cowards of the game.
In their submissions, the NRL pointed to modified rules for players aged from 6 to 15, with tackling from under 8s, while the AFL introduced a modified wrap tackle for under 9s and under 10s.
If you start to get repetitive impacts, even from 9 or 10 years of age, in developing brains, it can have a real effect later in life.
Changes will focus on repeat head knocks below the level of obvious concussion, as well as longer breaks after concussion, but not on dedicated insurance for head traumas. Australia is moving late. Last Wednesday marked a decade since the National Football League in America settled with former players for nearly 1.2 billion Australian dollars.
Rock bottom is almost losing custody of your daughter, not coming home at night, don't know where you are. It was kind of let life drag me along, and hopefully somebody would put me out of my misery.
With submissions from netball, cricket and even water skiing, the report's recommendations will stretch far beyond traditional contact sports, hoping to change the way our children play. Charles Croucher, 9 News.
The Prime Minister is tonight on his way to Jakarta on the first leg of a three-nation tour aimed at strengthening security and economic ties in our region. Anthony Albanese set to attend the East Asia Summit in Indonesia before stopping in the Philippines on his way to the G20 in New Delhi. A more stable relationship with China, one of his top priorities. Record rainfall in Spain has triggered deadly flooding from the capital Madrid to the north coast. At least 3 people have been killed in the outskirts of Toledo. That was smashed by more than 90 litres of rain per square metre. There are fears of increased military cooperation between North Korea and Russia, with reports Kim Jong-un plans to travel to Vladivostok to meet with President Putin and discuss supplying the country with more weapons. Putin is hoping to acquire artillery shells and anti-tank missiles to aid in the war in Ukraine. Australia Post plans to hike the price for stamps by 30 cents to $1.50 as delivery costs surge. If approved by the consumer watchdog, the price change will come into force from January 2024. The price of concession and seasonal stamps will not change. The results of an independent review into Sydney's toll roads have been made public. More than 1,000 submissions were made over 6 weeks, raising 3 main issues: pricing, availability of relief and the issuing of toll notices. Among the solutions being floated are toll caps and distance-based pricing. A final report on how the tolling system could be made fairer will be presented to the state government mid-next year. Clinics offering Botox and fillers have been put on notice after a crackdown on cosmetic surgery. Australia's medical regulator now has its sights on non-surgical procedures following a rise in complaints about rogue operators.
We all want to age gracefully, but each year Aussies are spending $1 billion trying to freeze time, and it doesn't always yield the desired results. Dr Robert Laidlaw, a cosmetic physician at Contour Clinics in Castle Hill, has seen it all. He often has patients come to him to correct botched work.
I mean, we see people all the time coming in, they've been to other clinics, they come in with a vascular occlusion, severe issues with bruising.
Now, AHPRA, the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency, is taking a closer look at non-surgical cosmetic procedures such as Botox, fillers, thread lifts and fat-dissolving injections to weed out rogue operators.
I don't think you could walk down a single high street anywhere in Australia and not see somebody who's offering cosmetic services.
The medical regulator also wants to ban clinics from using influencers to advertise cosmetic procedures and before and after photographs.
We want to make sure that there is a high bar for safety in this area, and we want to make sure that we're strengthening the hand of consumers.
The proposed changes come following an increase in complaints over the past year. The Cosmetic Hotline has received 428 calls from patients as well as doctors concerned about other practitioners. Of those calls, 179 resulted in formal complaints, with 14 doctors now no longer practicing or restricted from performing cosmetic procedures.
Most of us in the industry have come across instances where people really haven't been compliant.
At the end of the day, it is a medical treatment, a medical procedure with prescription medication, so it needs to be given the seriousness that it deserves.
In Castle Hill, Kate Creedon, 9 News.
A ship and 2 helicopters have travelled 3,000 kilometres to help evacuate an Australian researcher who's become unwell on the Casey station in Antarctica. An icebreaker vessel was used to reach the outpost 4,000 kilometres south of Perth.
This was a very complex operation for us. It's the earliest we've ever gone to an Antarctic station, just a day or two after the official end of winter, but it's still very much winter in Antarctica.
The patient has a developing condition and is expected to arrive in Tasmania later this week for medical attention. A major security response on the tarmac of Mexico City International Airport after a teenager stowed himself inside an aeroplane's landing gear as it was waiting to take off. After finding himself in hot water, he was tempted down with a cool drink, the boy taking the can of Coca-Cola before being taken into police custody. In the highly competitive and lucrative retail industry, finding out exactly what consumers want is highly sought after. Some shoppers are using this to their advantage, trading information about their spending habits for extra rewards.
Sally James does her grocery shopping every Thursday, and for 17 years she's meticulously recorded everything she buys. From groceries to petrol and homewares, her spending habits tracked and cashed in for rewards.
I've mainly cashed my points in for gift cards because that way I can just use them at whatever shops I want and buy whatever I want.
Many consumers use rewards or loyalty cards specific to a retailer. The IRI shop panel monitors spending habits across the board, from a major grocery chain to a department store, even an outdoor retailer.
So there's 2 main groups of people that are interested in the data. That's the retailers, who are trying to figure out what to put on shelf and what to sell, and what we call the manufacturers, so the farmers, the growers.
For the major grocery players, information is key as each vie for greater profits and market share.
Data is the #1 priority at the moment for retailers. It is king for them to understand how customers are behaving and why they shop with them.
Sally is one of more than 13,000 people who are closely tracked, and it helps her also with the budget.
I like that I'm more conscious of the price of everything since I started doing the scanning.
Vicky Jardim, 9 News.
The countdown to New Year's Eve is well and truly on, with the City of Sydney launching its online Vantage Point Finder and opening the ballot for tickets to watch the fireworks from the Cahill Expressway. You can enter the ballot via the council website, which also has an interactive map to help you find a place to watch. And the best bit, this year, most Vantage Points are free.